everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick magic gameplay. This time around we are playing as Norsca against the Brettonians on the map here at Ridge. So I've wanted to run a Mammoth for a while, and that is what this build is centered around, the Soul Crusher, and that's really basically the anchor of this entire build. Everything else basically made to, or brought to make the Mammoth work. I think this is one of the few matchups. Honestly, the Mammoth had, for those of you who don't know, there was most of the infantry units, or many or most of the units in Warhammer 2 got significant buffs to their HP pools, and this has actually resulted in a pseudo nerf for the Mammoth, because the Mammoth before could just kind of trample through infantry units with its bonus against infantry, with its monstrous weapon strength, melee attack, all that sort of stuff, and really didn't take too much damage. But now it struggles a bit to clear those infantry up fast enough, so it does tend to take more damage. And the Mammoth itself has not really gotten an improvement to its HP pool. It's still huge as it was before, but it's not as crazy as relative to everything else as it used to be. So I did decide to bring the Soul Crusher. I think it's a safer pick here, just because it does have Strider, which means it can move smoothly everywhere. It does, of course, still have Fear and Terror, but more importantly, it has this Enrage mechanic, where for 22 seconds you get a 44% ward save, which is really pretty good. If your opponent dives you with anti-large cavalry, is trying to shoot you down with AP missiles, anything like that, you can block a good chunk of that damage. So that's basically why I brought Soul Crusher. And of course, otherwise, Soul Crusher stats are really solid. 46 melee defense, 54 melee attack. Honestly, really good. 80 charge bonus. And of course, those Norscans on the back shooting missiles. For the rest of the build, nothing fancy. Frontline, mix of Marauders and 3 Marauders, 2 Marauder Berserkers. Figuring that, except maybe Foot Squires or just a horde of Battle Pilgrims, these guys will basically trash anything my opponent puts on the front line. They're definitely more expensive than anything, especially the Marauder Berserkers are more expensive than any Brettonian infantry, except maybe the Beast Slayer's Bastion. The Marauders, obviously nothing too special, but they should beat Men-at-Arms, and that's really all you can expect from them. They are backed by a single unit of Fimir Warriors. These guys are actually the ones with the great weapons, and I figured if, in case my opponent decided to bring Grail Guardians, I really wanted something that could crack them quick and pretty efficiently. So I brought these guys with, they've got 30 bonus for large, they've got magic damage and armor sundering, which will debuff the knights, bypass their physical resist, all that stuff, so very solid there. And of course they do have their From the Mist ability, which gives them 22% missile resist. This actually does stack with Runa's Flesh from the nearby Werkin, providing a further 11% missile resist and some additional armor, so some really solid buffs there, making them pretty monstrous. Out on the periphery, 2 Norscan Ice Wolves are providing a sort of flanking force. And in the heart of the swarm, no casters actually, I decided to bring Wulfric the Wanderer mounted on a horse here with full kit except Foeseeker, and then 2 Skinwolf Werkin, who of course are incredibly potent. They're basically a Gore Bull, but better in every way that matters. They're very quick on their feet, they've got AP weapon strength, bonus versus large, decent armor, regen, physical resist, and one of them here does have the Runa's Flesh, which does grant an AoE bonus to armor as well as missile resistance, so very solid upgrades there. For my opponent's build, very infantry heavy, and if we go over it real quick, you can see the numbers game. My opponent outnumbers me almost 3-1. The front line is a mix of Foot Squires on the periphery. The center of composed of Men-at-Arms with shields, with a handful of Battle Pilgrims, really anchoring things, providing that sort of anti-infantry boost. They probably trade pretty efficiently, I'd imagine, with Berserkers, at least until the Berserkers traits start kicking in. They are backed. You can see the Holy Wardens of Vlamai Tal here. These guys are just a roided up version of Battle Pilgrims who discard shields for far better melee stats, and of course they do fire and magic damage, which could be potent against Norsca. Norsca does have a decent amount of physical resistance and a decent amount of regenerating units. 2 Peasant Bowmen with Pox Arrows, or actually 2 Peasant Bowmen with Pox Arrows here, who will be hitting my troops, and you can see they're already firing away at Wulfric. They're going to be debuffing him, but honestly Wulfric can shrug most of it off. They do have pretty pitiful stats. 2 Peasants, stat extra support. A single Grail Relic here. The Grail Relic has been altered. It's actually 100 cheaper now, but it is much less tanky. You can see its HP pool sitting at 2606, where it used to be in the around 3400, I do believe, or 3200, something like that. On the periphery, my opponent does have the Lionhearted. Next to the Lionhearted, he does have the Grail Knights, so 2 very heavy shock cav, one of which does cause fear, which can be decent against some Norscan units, and both have magic damage to bypass physical resist. They'll do okay against, say, Werkin, and then the Companions of Kennelis, which are Questing Knights, Regiment of Renown. They've got the physical resist from Favor of the Fae, though no, they do not have the constant immunity to Vigor, so that's a little unfortunate for them, but their stats are honestly pretty monstrous, and they do have some fire resistance, they've got some physical resistance, and they're just very, very tanky. I'm actually not sure what their fire resist is, 25%, so definitely some pretty crazy stats there. And they are all backed by the Fanchantress here in the center with Earth, Blood Regrowth, the Chalice of Potions, Favor of the Fae and Arcane Conduit, as well as, of course, her Mist Aura and Life Bloom. So regardless, you can see I'm immediately piling through. I'm actually going to send the Mammoth onto the Soul Crusher. And Wolfric and the boys here are going to dive right through and head straight after the Grail Relic. The Grail Relic is, of course, a large target, which will make it incredibly susceptible to this fire. And it can't really defend itself. It's got bad melee defense. It's got fairly low armor, low HP pool nowadays. So you can see these guys are going to be clocking it pretty hard, and it's immediately getting melted. Now, for the rest of my army, you can see the Marauders are getting massacred. They are beating the men-at-arms with shields, but they're going to get piled in on by these Battle Pilgrims and the Foot Squires and collapse really quickly. Fortunately for my opponent, these Berserkers have already buckled the men-at-arms center and are pushing through and going straight for the backline. Same thing over here. The Berserkers are just such a force of nature, and while the Battle Pilgrims are beating down the Marauders, they're not able to move and engage the Marauder Berserkers. Meantime, my Wolves are shifting away from my opponent's cavalry. I know that I don't want them to be engaged, so I'm just avoiding these Foot Squires and cycling around the back. Foot Squires did get a slight buff to HP, same with Battle Pilgrims, but they're really not able to hold. You can see my opponent does cast Bombardment here, doing a bit of damage to the Marauders, but really not much to the Mammoth. And this whole front line is collapsing. The Grail Relic is in tatters, and it's getting torn to shreds here by Wolfric and the boys. The Marauders not doing too hot, but honestly, with this much heroic support, they'll do okay. The Mammoth is still holding strong. It does pile into these Knights. The Grail Knights just really can't hold up against it. I do pop in range to get that resist, because of course Grail Knights do have pretty monstrous anti-large bonus, and I do believe they got some mass buffs or something, but they're still a fairly expensive unit. But regardless, Soul Crusher does push in, and it's definitely trampling these guys pretty good. The Knights of the Lionhearted, the Grail Knights, already taking a beating. I do immediately turn the Grail Knight is routed, so I'm going to turn the attention of the Werkin and Wolfric onto these guys. I do have the Premier Warriors with great weapons in there, and they are going to start crumping these guys. Premier can basically shrug off the Warriors of La Maisontal, and really the goal here is to crush the Brettonian Knights. On the periphery, you can see the Marauder Berserkers piling through, crushing the peasant mob that tried to get in the way, and diving straight into the peasant bowmen with pox arrows. On the other end, the Berserkers here tearing through the peasants, and the Wolves are swarming around. One unit of Wolves gets on these Battle Pilgrims, flanking them and dropping their morale significantly. The second unit of Wolves is actually going to plow through and go after the peasant bowmen. Meantime, while my Marauders do rout, so do the Battle Pilgrims, and my opponent's army at this point is in a very, very bad spot. You can see the balance of power slowly but surely creeping in my direction. The Marauder Berserkers here tearing through the peasant bows, who really just don't stand a chance. Poor guys. These guys are up to over 200 kills already. The second unit of Berserkers is coming back. They're going to engage on these Battle Pilgrims. But things are just getting brutal. Of course, the Marauders do rampage, which is going to be a big weakness, because as they stay in combat for a prolonged period of time, they start rampaging, and I won't have control. I can't order them to pursue, but regardless, you can see the peasant bowmen here getting hunted down. The Irish Wolves do have a frostbite, which is solid. They're a fairly cheap unit at 650, but the main thing is that, I don't know if I can get just a visual here on them. They do have decent weapon strength, even though they're poisoned here. That's going to wear off shortly. They do have some decent sort of AP stats in there. They've got just overall very solid stats, and not great melee defense, but still they're going to do well, and they're going to tear through those peasants pretty quick. Berserkers here doing a number on the Battle Pilgrims, of course, with their buffed melee attack and physical resist. They'll do great. Mammoth, you can see, is getting chipped away. It's definitely not holding up indefinitely against these guys, but it is holding up, and that's what really matters. My opponent has surrounded me here. He is trying to slowly but surely chip away at me, but the Marauders are actually holding surprisingly strong here. I do cast a Sea Fang over here, trying to kind of buckle this backline, but it obviously isn't going to do too much against Knights. Just want to get some damage in there. But the Werkin still holding 32 kills. The Grail Knights have at this point lost over half their models. The Knights of the Lionhearted, who really wish they were in another neighborhood, are getting hewn down by the Soul Crusher. Melee defense is just not good enough to hold up against this monstrous beast. And it does just swiftly shift. It's just kind of crushing through all these units. But Wolfric is still very healthy. The Battle Pilgrims are routing. There's Marauder Berserkers just chopping their way through, hitting these Foot Squires in the back, and you can see on the peripheries, I'm starting to the companions of Quenellus did rout, so I'm actually diving in after them with the Norsca Ice Wolves. These guys have lost their physical resist. The goal, of course, is not to kill these guys, it's just to slow them down, to prevent them from helping in the fight. And you can see the Wolves are actually catching a few of these Knights in the back. They're not going to do great damage, but you can see they drag a few of them down because my opponent wasn't paying attention. And at this point, despite the Fan Enchantress bravely diving into the fray, it is going to be GG as my opponent's army shatters to army losses. So overall, an absolutely brutal game. I lost the majority of my forces in that game, as did my opponent. Roughly 60% losses for me, even greater for my opponent. That's like 80% or so losses for my opponent. I do think this is a somewhat competitive build against the Brettonians. They don't have great solutions to the Mammoth. However, I will note that the Mammoths are no longer the unstoppable force they were in Warhammer 1. In Warhammer 1, you needed very specific builds to shut them down, and it was incredibly difficult, especially for factions like Brettonia here. But now with the reduction in their relative HP, because they didn't get an HP buff, or most of these units did get at least a slight HP buff, they do take a bit longer to shoot the units. Obviously here, 53 kills, not too spectacular, even if most of it was against Ground Knights and Companions, Quentinus, and that sort of stuff. The Fimir Great Warriors, Great Weapons did a decent job. I definitely am not complaining about the Soul Crusher. It did good. It anchored the line, it held its own, it was terror routing units with the help of the Hero Squad here gooning out the Grail Relic. It was able to do really well. But really, watch out. Mammoths are, well, still a force to be reckoned with. They are no longer, I think, the dominant monstrosity they were in Warhammer 1, where there was just very few niche strategies to deal with them. Marauders, they're okay. I don't know much to say. They'll beat Men-at-Arms with shields in a straight-up fight. They'll beat Peasants. They can dive into the backline, get on top of Peasant Bowmen, and they'll hold okay, but they're nothing too spectacular. Nonetheless, the Marauder Berserkers, absolutely powerhouse units here, chopping their way through the Men-at-Arms, immediately diving into the backline and tearing through all these Peasants. You can see almost 250 kills on one, over 250 on the other. So just so strong. Wolves, similar thing. They both did rather well, all things considered. Cheap unit that provides potential pressure for your opponent that they have to consider. So I think they're pretty strong in that sense. Wolfric and the two Werkin, decent sort of goon squad. They can help against cavalry. They can probably outduel like a single unit of cavalry pretty efficiently, like say Grail Knights or Companions of Quentinus or something like that. They can probably dumpster them pretty quick. Wolfric, of course, does provide his AoE buffs. He does, of course, do quite a bit of damage himself. The two Skin Wolf Werkin are just absolute monsters against Cav. So all in all, I think a decent goon squad, even though you are sacrificing magic in its entirety. My opponent's build, interesting take, I think, on the anti-Norsca build. I would probably personally drop some of the infantry to make room for an additional Grail Knight. Maybe some Grail Guardians, I'm not entirely sure, but I definitely think more anti-large was needed. Mammoths are killable now, I think, with Grail Knights and Cav units like that, more so than they were before. So I really would try to get an extra anti-large unit in there. The Peasant Bowmen didn't really hold up. They got overwhelmed rather badly, and that definitely kind of ruined my opponent's chances. Nonetheless, cool build. It definitely gave some trouble in a few spots, and was interesting to see. It was definitely interesting to see how this held up against the might of Norsca. So I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it entertaining and fun and all that sort of stuff. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticisms, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.